Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Modular. This is a series of videos designed to help you take the first steps into modular synthesis on Eurorack. In this episode, we're looking at a virtual instrument, aptly named Modular, from Softube. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, why on earth are we farting around in software when we're trying to buy into a completely hardware system? Well, it's a good question, a very good question. And I have one fairly simple answer. It's a reality check. Up until now, we've got quite a romantic notion of what modular synthesis is all about. It's really cool and interesting and a fabulous sound and modulation. And there's these patch cables and knobs and it just looks amazing and it sounds fantastic and creative. And I just want to get sort of in there. And it's, you know, it's synthesis, right? So how hard could it be? I mean, you might have even got yourself a semi-modular synth. So you have started to convince yourself that you know all about patching and you know how to put things together and route things around. But what even a semi-modular synth doesn't teach you is how to patch the basics together. I mean, I guess this is the reason why some people say it's best not to start with a semi-modular. I mean, I still think that it really is the best place to start for modular synthesis, but it's certainly true that it doesn't teach you the basics because all of those things are already done inside the panel. And connecting your basic modules together, the oscillator, the envelope, the amplifier, those things are actually not as simple as you'd think. So a piece of software like Softube Modular is ideally placed to reveal both the joy, but also the horror and frustration of modular synthesis. Plus, it's only 70 quid. I mean, Softube Modular was, for me, a complete wake-up call. I loaded it up thinking, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I didn't find the presets. I didn't quite know how to find the presets. And so I just got stuck in, you know, oscillator, VCA, VCF, LFO, envelope, and then tried to patch them together. And it took me ages to get any sound out. I couldn't work out anything. All of the patch points didn't seem to be labeled with anything useful. And that was a point where I realized that actually I don't know anything about this really, and I needed to open the manual. I mean, no one likes to read a manual, but I had to get in there and start working out exactly how this thing works, because my world of synthesis up to that point never got down to that nitty-gritty of getting the sound out from oscillator to go somewhere else. And what I realize is that the fabulousness of modular synthesis doesn't start to reveal itself until you've put in a bit of work. I mean, up until that point, it's actually frustrating and intimidating and extremely throwing your computer off the desk type annoying. And you need to go through those emotions, those feelings, before you've invested hundreds and hundreds of pounds into a case and a bunch of modules. And Softube Modular gives you that opportunity. It gives you an opportunity to get rid of all those fights and those initial frustrations that you're going to have with modular synthesis before you've bought the farm, before you've put all that money in and all that effort in. And I think that's an incredibly healthy way to approach this new endeavor. This journey that I'm on, I think, would be helped by ridding myself of some of that stress and that anxiety so that I can begin with proper hardware with some kind of idea as to what to do next. So I'd recommend that you spend a couple of nights with Softube Modular. And, you know, in a similar idea to the semi-modular, it gives you an opportunity to get off this crazy journey if you just find that it's not for you. And you can do that without having spent a whole load of money. And you can still enjoy the sounds and the idea of modular just safely in a virtual environment. So let me give you a demo and show you what I mean. Softube Modular then, running in Ableton Live on my Surface Pro 4. Softube Modular is designed to absolutely be a Eurorack, to be everything that Eurorack does, to be the modules, to be the case, to work in exactly the same way. There's no cheating, there's no pre-patching, there's nothing that's already connected up. You have to make all of the connections yourself. And that's why this is such a fabulous introduction into modular synthesis. I got hold of a copy of this right at the beginning of my modular synthesis journey, and it was quite an eye-opener because I thought I understood synthesis. I thought I knew how the signal chain routed through a synthesizer. And clearly, when I started this up, I had absolutely no idea. And that's the point, really, because if I hadn't tried this, I might have found myself sitting in front of £1,000 worth of modules and case and actually not have any idea how to make it work. Now you may not be anywhere near as stupid as I am, and you might have a complete grasp of all this. That's fine. But without being patronising, all I'm trying to show within this video is just the basic steps that I went through in order to unlock modular synthesis for myself. It took a bit of time. It required me to open the manual and look through things and copy patch diagrams and such like, but it's been immensely useful in setting me along the right path. And by way of demonstration, I just wanted to share that with you. So let's start with an oscillator. Here's one. Within Softube Modular, you get a bunch of Doepfer modules, the basics that you need for a synthesizer, and a few utility modules. There's a lot of other stuff you can add to it, but the basics are enough for us to get started. So oscillator. Here we go. It's an A110. As I said, this is Eurorack, and all of these modules are virtual versions of actual hardware you can buy. So I have my oscillator. It's this which creates the sound. How do I get to hear the sound? Well, I have to make the connection. I have to take the output from the oscillator wave I want to use and stick it into the output. There you go. Inspiring, isn't it? So, well, how do I make the pitch go up and down? Well, I've got a knob. And the idea with analog synthesis, with modular synthesis, is that you put a control voltage in here in order to alter the pitch. So where can that come from? Well, from Ableton. So let's run a sequence. I've got one here, beep, 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 like so, set that running. But none of that is actually coming in to Softube Modular. Well, that's because it's a Eurorack. It doesn't understand MIDI unless you put in a module that can convert that MIDI signal into CV. Yeah, it is absolutely that anal. There's no, like any other virtual instrument you load up, it's automatically connected to the MIDI track and you play the keyboard or you play your sequence and it works. Not so with Softube Modular, and that's the genius of it. That's why it's useful, because it's not cheating. It's not giving you that sense of security. You're going to have to work it out. So what we need is a MIDI to CV module. There we go, there's one. Now, because I'm a bit anal, I like to move these about. So the MIDI to CV converter is taking that sequence and turning it into control voltage notes. And what I do is I take that note socket and I plug it in to the first oscillator CV input. And that is now going to be changing the pitch. Let's plug it in. That's awesome. That's a start. At the very least, we're getting sound out and we're playing a tune. However, if we look back at our sequence, we can see that all the notes are actually of different lengths, and that's not being reflected in what we hear. That's because we're not sending any gate information. Now, gate information simply opens the note and closes again at the end of the note to create the note length, if you like. Now, there's a gate option here, but there's nowhere that I can put it on the VCO to make that happen. Now, my assumption, coming from regular synthesizers, is that everything happens to the VCO. And actually, that's not true. The VCO just continues to output a signal. The only thing that's really applied to it directly is anything to do with pitch. Everything else is done elsewhere. So where do we gate it? Well, you actually gate it with an amplifier. So let's load a VCA. VCA. There we go. So we want to take the output into an in on the VCA, and then that out goes to our output. So now we have a nice little knob to control the volume, because that's what the amplifier is doing. It's controlling the volume. The gate output then, rather than turning the VCO on and off, is actually going to be applied to the amplifier to turn that up and down. So let's take our gate, apply that to that input there. And now you can hear that the note length is actually being respected. Now that's great, but the next thing I want is I want a bit of shape to that sound. I want an envelope, an attack, and a sustain release, that kind of thing. Now, I absolutely assumed that from my world of synthesis that the envelope applied to the oscillator. So like the signal path would go from the oscillator then through this envelope to create the shape of it. That's complete nonsense. That's not what happens. Again, the envelope is applied to the amplifier. It's changing the volume. So it applies to the amplifier, not to the oscillator. That's probably completely obvious to you, but to me, that had me scratching my head for ages. So let me demonstrate that. Let's add an envelope. So what I want to do is take the gate, which is currently going into the amplifier, and put it into the envelope. The gate will then trigger the envelope, and the envelope will modulate the amplifier to give us the shape of the envelope that we want. So we take the output here, plug that into the CV input. Now if I change the attack, or the release, there's the envelope affecting the amplifier that is ultimately shaping the sound. So that's a really simple, basic synthesizer patch. Right, let's add a filter. You always want to add a filter. Filters are always the best thing that we want to use. So here's a VCF. Now with a filter, it does actually act directly on the audio from the oscillator. So you want your audio from your oscillator to go through the filter, just like you'd expect it to. So this is the one thing that's probably a bit more intuitive. So you take the output of your oscillator and plug that into the input on the filter, which is there. I then take the output of the filter that I want to use and plug that back into the amplifier. So if you like, the VCO is now routing out through the filter and then back to the amplifier. You can already hear the filter is there. Emphasis down here. Simple. Now we want to add a bit more in modulation, so we'll put in an LFO and we'll get that to control the cutoff, of course, because that's what you do, isn't it? So I'll bring this and stick that into there. Lovely, and that's modular synthesis. That's kind of doing it for real. Everything that you do within Softube Modular is exactly how you would do it in the real thing, in a real Eurorack. And that is phenomenally useful. And this piece of software has enabled me to move from a position of kind of misunderstanding and frustration and annoyed, anxious madness to a place where when I finally receive my hardware, I'm going to be able to patch it together relatively confidently and know what I'm doing. So yeah, Softube Modular, it's enabled me to get over those first few hurdles. It's enabled me to fight through that frustration and work out how these things actually fit together. That's invaluable. It's enormously useful, and I would recommend this to anyone considering going into modular synthesis. One more little thing then, let's add a sequencer. Rather than having the MIDI going into CV, let's put a proper Eurorack sequencer in there to have it a little bit more standalone. So to make this work, I just need to put the CV out into the CV on the oscillator, and I need to make the gate to the gate on the envelope and turn on the notes I want to use. Now it's not going along. So why wouldn't it be going along? Well, because it needs a clock. It needs something to tell it what the tempo is. Well, of course, the tempo in Ableton Live is 111, so that should work, shouldn't it? Well, no, of course, because this is a flipping Eurorack and it has no connection to Ableton Live. So what I need is another module which is going to take the clock from Ableton and convert it into a clock that the Eurorack's going to understand. So we do that, go to something called DAW Sync, and this has got different dividers, so we need to have the thing running. It takes a 1-to-1 clock or a quarter or an 8th note, 16th, 32th, that kind of thing, and we can put that into our sequencer, into the clocking of our sequencer to move that along. Now currently it's all playing the same note, so I need to move these about. like so. And there you go. I will be doing videos on how to connect your DAW, your computer, to your Eurorack system. Absolutely, that's something that interests me a great deal. I want to be using all of the tools at my disposal, not just hardware, not just software, the whole lot. So this is not about throwing away the software. This is about doing something different within hardware and then integrating the two back together. So that's Softube Modular, well worth your 70 quid if you're interested in moving into hardware modular systems. It will be a real eye-opener. It will give you a chance to learn some very basic skills, and it's a lot of fun to play with. And once you can find them, there's actually a good bunch of presets in here which give you a good idea as to what a modular system is capable of. Softube Modular is excellent. It's a great piece of work. They've really captured a lot of the essence of modular synthesis. Of course, you can buy extra modules and expand it and really get into doing some interesting stuff. But even with the basic DOFA modules in there, there's a lot of fun to be had. However, there is a really important distinction to be made between using software modular and the hardware equivalent. And this goes for other bits of modular software as well, like Native Instruments Reactor. All of these things can sound really, really good and give you a massive amount of power and depth to the programming and patching and the way you put the sounds together. But for me, a huge part of modular synthesis is in the physicality, is in the picking up of a patch cable and finding a socket and plugging it in, is feeling my hands on these knobs and moving them, and switches and sliders and bits and pieces. There is something fundamentally different about patching with a patch cable and patching with a mouse in software. I mean, maybe it's ridiculous, maybe it's all psychological and up in my head. I mean, I'm not sure that matters. I mean, what does matter is the experience you have when using your gear. I mean, I've been happy with software for years and years and years, for decades. I'm your software guy. I've never really had a mixing console or any of these big hardware controllers. I'm completely happy directing my creativity through that mouse and into my DAW and into my computer-based system. That's been fine for me. But more recently, I've found myself pushing outside of that into some MIDI controllers, into touch interfaces on the Surface and on touchscreens. And so the evolution into hardware seems very natural to me. I mean, I know I can do phenomenal things in software, create sounds that hardware could never even contemplate. But that's not the point. It's not the sound. It's not even the connectivity. It's to do with getting your hands in there, to do with the physicality of it. It's to do with the experience of touching and feeling and the circuitry and the electronics and understanding and coming to terms with that and being very intentional in how I put sound together within the limitations of the natural hardware boundary. In software, it just always appears to be so limitless. You can go wherever you like, and I'm increasingly finding that unhelpful. Whereas in a restricted environment of a handful of modules, I feel I have to get more out of them. I feel I have to be more creative to use them. I feel that it will allow my creativity and ultimately the music that I make to flourish. And that's why I'm taking this journey into Eurorack. It might all be for nothing. Who knows? I might be just as crap at making music with hardware as I am making it with software. Who knows? It's a journey. It's a journey we're on. We don't know where it's going to take us, but I am well up for it. So this is episode 3 on my Eurorack journey, and I still have not yet ordered a single module. Yeah. So this is all about to get very, very real. I have ordered my first case. I've done it. I've ordered my first case and power supply. Oh my God. So that's very exciting. And my next video is going to be covering my entire research for that, what I went through, what I looked at, and we'll try to sort of unpack what the options are when it comes to selecting a case, choosing a case, or perhaps even building a case. And then I will attempt to understand power supplies and give you some pointers as to how to choose a case. and what is going to work well for what you want to do. It's one of those really sort of key areas to get you started in modular synthesis, and I get the feeling that it's not as difficult as it used to be, and I really hope that I can demonstrate that. So that's coming next, but until then, go and make some tunes.